Have you ever had a secret that was so big it changed everything? Imagine keeping that secret for years and years. That is exactly what happened with Prince Philip and Queen Elizabeth. For a long, long time, they were known as the perfect royal couple. They always smiled for the cameras and seemed so happy together. Everyone thought they had a fairy tale life. But behind the scenes, something was going on. After more than 70 years of marriage, Prince Philip made a choice that shocked everyone. He decided he did not want to live with the Queen anymore. This was a huge surprise. People all over the world started to wonder what had gone wrong. Was it because of a fight? Was there a secret that no one knew about? The truth stayed hidden for a very long time. But now, Princess Anne, along with her brothers King Charles and Prince Andrew, have finally shared the real story. They have told everyone why their father made this surprising choice. So, get ready to learn the truth about why Prince Philip chose to live apart from the Queen. The person who finally told the truth is Princess Anne. She is the only daughter of Prince Philip and Queen Elizabeth. When she spoke, people were amazed. For many years, there were all sorts of guesses about why Prince Philip left Buckingham Palace. Some people thought one thing and others thought something else. No one really knew for sure. But now, the secret is out. Princess Anne was very close to her father. Many people said she was his favorite child. She has a strong personality, just like him. She is known for being direct, stubborn, and having a sharp sense of humor. She does not like to waste time on things that are not important. This is exactly how her father was, too. They both could be very sarcastic, and they had little patience for people who did not understand things quickly. But the most important thing was their loyalty. They would never say anything bad about each other. They would playfully tease each other, but they always had deep respect for one another. While her brothers, Charles and Andrew, were often busy with their royal jobs, Princess Anne was watching what was happening between her parents. She saw the truth. She saw what was really going on behind the perfect smiles and the perfect pictures. Her parents looked like the perfect royal couple to everyone else, but Anne knew the real story. She saw the challenges they faced. Her father also talked to her about his problems. He told her about the difficulties he had in his marriage. But to really understand why Prince Philip moved away, we have to go back to the very beginning. We need to see how their love story started. Before Princess Anne or her brothers were born, Queen Elizabeth was just a princess. Her name was Princess Elizabeth. She first met Prince Philip at a wedding in 1934. At that time, he was 13 and she was only 8 years old. There was no special connection between them then, but 5 years later, they met again. Princess Elizabeth was 13 and Prince Philip was 18. The princess was visiting a naval college with her parents and her sister. They were supposed to meet some of the students, and Philip was one of them, but things did not go as planned. Some of the students were sick with the mumps and chicken pox. So, instead of going to a church service, they spent time at the headmaster's house. Prince Philip came to entertain the young princesses. He was one of the people who was not sick. Soon, Philip got tired of being inside. He asked the princesses to come outside with him. He started to play games. He played croquet and jumped over tennis nets. He was full of energy and seemed so carefree. This really caught Princess Elizabeth's attention. Right at that moment, she fell in love with him. She later said that she never had eyes for anyone else after that day. She had a huge teenage crush on him. While he was serving in the Royal Navy during the war, they wrote letters to each other. She even kept a picture of him in her bedroom because she admired him so much. By 1946, Philip came back from the war and their relationship grew stronger. He asked her to marry him. He wrote her a beautiful letter saying that because of the war, he had been saved and he had found victory. He said he had fallen completely in love. He felt that because of this, all the troubles in the world seemed small. But Queen Elizabeth's father, King George VI, was not sure about the marriage. He worried that Elizabeth was too young. He thought she might meet someone else and change her mind. So, the royal family did not tell anyone about Philip's proposal. Some people in the family also did not like Philip. Even though he was a prince and related to Queen Victoria, many people thought he was too rough, too German, and not English enough for Princess Elizabeth. But Elizabeth was determined. She had made up her mind. She was going to marry him. A year later, in 1947, they officially announced their engagement. Before the wedding, Philip had to give up his Greek and Danish royal titles. He also had to become a member of the Church of England. He did all of this without complaining because he loved Elizabeth so much. He also took a new last name, Mountbatten. On November 20, 1947, Princess Elizabeth married Philip at Westminster Abbey in London. They went on their honeymoon to a home in Hampshire, England. But Philip had no idea that his life was about to change in ways he never expected. After the wedding, Philip kept serving in the Navy. He did very well and moved up in rank. A year later, they had their first son, Charles. Then they had their daughter, Anne. Philip's Navy career was going great and he was posted to Malta. Elizabeth traveled to be with him there. Their children stayed back in England. For a short while, they had a pretty normal life, but everything changed in 1952. King George VI got sick and died. This happened just 5 years after they got married. Elizabeth and Philip's whole world was turned upside down. Elizabeth was only 25, and now she was the queen. Philip was 30, and he had to adjust to a whole new reality. They thought they would have more time to live their own lives before Elizabeth became queen. But that was not meant to be. Now Elizabeth was going to be the queen. But what was Philip going to be? He would not be a king. He would have to stay in the shadows of his wife. This was always going to be the case, but it affected their relationship a lot. Elizabeth becoming queen meant Philip had to give up his dreams of having a career in the Navy. For a man who was used to being in charge of ships, suddenly being in a supporting role was not easy. And remember, this was the 1950s. It was very rare for a husband to be outranked and controlled by his wife. This was even harder for Philip because his wife was the most important person in the country. This meant that duty came before family. This was the start of a lifelong struggle for Philip. This struggle would eventually lead to his decision to live apart from the Queen in his later years. When Elizabeth and Philip were on a trip in Kenya, they found out that her father had died. Elizabeth knew what she had to do. They went back to the UK right away. When they arrived, Elizabeth became Queen Elizabeth II, but Philip's title did not change. He was not named King Consort. He was just given the title of Royal Consort. Even so, Philip supported his wife completely. He left his Navy career to serve the monarchy. But this was just the first of many changes. They moved from their old home to Buckingham Palace. On June 2, 1953, Elizabeth's coronation took place at Westminster Abbey. After the Archbishop of Canterbury, Philip was the first person to kneel in front of the new queen. He promised to be her loyal subject for life. But was he truly able to do this? It was much easier said than done. For a man to live under a woman's authority and give up his own dreams to support the queen was very hard. Philip also had to get used to walking a few steps behind his wife in public, instead of beside her. He later said that he thought he was going to have a long career in the Navy, but it quickly became clear that there was no hope for that. He had to compromise. Philip accepted his new reality and tried to make the best of it. However, there were early conflicts between him and Elizabeth after she became queen. One big fight happened when Philip's uncle said that the House of Mountbatten now ruled in England. This meant that since Elizabeth was married, her children would have Philip's last name. But Elizabeth's grandmother and Prime Minister Winston Churchill did not agree. They insisted that Elizabeth and her descendants would continue under the House of Windsor. This was to keep her father's legacy. Philip was deeply hurt by this decision. He said he was nothing but a bloody amoeba. He said he was the only man in the country who was not allowed to pass his name to his children. His words showed his frustration and his struggle to find his own identity within the monarchy. When Queen Elizabeth heard his words, she decided to make some changes. In 1960, she announced that her descendants would have the last name Mountbatten Windsor. This was a combination of both their last names. While Elizabeth was the head of the monarchy, Philip took on the role of royal consort. But his role was not clearly defined. He once told a journalist that he was often seen as just a refugee husband. Even though he tried hard to make his position work, he struggled to find a meaningful role for himself. He was always in his wife's shadow. Prince Philip described his experience as royal consort as one of trial and error. He was not the first royal consort in history, but he faced challenges that had no clear precedent. He also admitted that when he asked what was expected of him as royal consort, people had no real answer. They just looked blank. However, one thing was clear to Philip. His first duty was to serve his wife, Queen Elizabeth, in the best way he could. This was a big contrast to Philip's dynamic and outspoken personality. He was a lot like his daughter, Princess Anne, but he carried out his duties with complete devotion. In his first years, Philip focused on modernizing the monarchy. He was afraid it could become a museum piece. But this was not easy. He faced resistance from the old guard who wanted to keep traditions, but Philip did not back down, and he had some big successes. He suggested broadcasting the Queen's coronation on live television. More than 20 million people watched it. This showed that he had great foresight. It was the first time the monarchy was so visible to the public. Philip also became the first royal to sit for a television interview. After about 10 years, they even let cameras into their homes for a behind-the-scenes documentary. But that was not all. Philip encouraged Elizabeth to stop the old practice of presenting debutantes at court. He also introduced informal lunches and garden parties so they could meet more people. He took steps to reorganize and renovate the royal estates. He wanted to make the royal household and the monarchy less rigid. He did not want so much formality everywhere. Prince Philip had a lot of time to himself because he had fewer official duties. He explored his interests. By the 1980s, he had written 9 books. He also encouraged Elizabeth to televise her annual Christmas messages. He taught her how to use a teleprompter. He was the first member of the royal family to use a computer, writing his own emails and speeches. He was a man of great curiosity. Queen Elizabeth did her best to include Philip in her public speeches. She often said, "My husband and I," which became a national joke, but Philip was not just a figurehead. Despite the challenges the crown brought, they faced them together. In family matters, Elizabeth let him take the lead, but in state matters, he had no real say. However, there were moments when he treated her as an ordinary wife, even in public. For example, once while Philip was driving Elizabeth to the park, his speed made her tense. She drew in her breath at critical moments. Philip got angry and said if she did it again, he would put her out of the car. Even though she was the queen, she composed herself and did not protest. But there were also moments when she asserted her authority. Sometimes she yelled at him to shut up. This would often make him leave the room in frustration. Like any couple, they had their ups and downs. However, there was another thing that was often talked about: rumors of Prince Philip being unfaithful. People said he was unfaithful, mostly because of his naturally flirtatious manner. This made him the center of gossip. His involvement in certain clubs and his tour on the royal yacht led to speculation about possible affairs. Over the years, he was linked to several women, including a Russian ballerina, an English stage actor, and a writer. But none of these alleged affairs were ever confirmed. At one point, a newspaper published a story claiming that Philip was romantically involved with an unnamed woman he met regularly in an apartment. The palace denied the story. They dismissed the idea of a rift between him and the queen. Philip also addressed the rumors sarcastically. He asked if anyone had ever seen him go anywhere without a police escort. He implied that having an affair would have been impossible. However, a royal biographer had a different view. She claimed that since a rumored affair in the mid-1950s, Philip had learned to be more discreet. He conducted his flirtatiousness in elite circles that were grand enough to protect him from the press. Despite all the rumors, no infidelity was ever confirmed. What has always been evident was Philip's devotion to Queen Elizabeth. During their 50th wedding anniversary, Queen Elizabeth described him as her strength and stay throughout the years. She said they owed him more than they would ever claim or know. Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip went on to celebrate their diamond and platinum anniversaries. Elizabeth always expressed gratitude for his support and love. But in 2017, something happened that led to a big change in their relationship. After over 70 years of marriage, they decided to live apart. What could have led to this decision? In May 2017, Prince Philip announced his retirement from public life. But he did not actually retire until August of that year. He attended his final royal engagement at the age of 96. Buckingham Palace released a statement saying that the Duke of Edinburgh would no longer do public engagements. He might attend some events with the Queen, but this rarely happened. Prince Philip was involved with something else. After his retirement, he moved from Buckingham Palace to Wood Farm on the Sandringham estate. This was a place known as the former home of Prince John, a son of King George V and Queen Mary. Prince John lived there in quiet seclusion with his nurse until he died at age 13. But why did Prince Philip choose to live here? In a 2011 interview, he stated that he wanted to enjoy himself. He did not retire until he was 96, but his decision had the full approval of the Queen. She knew how supportive Philip had been and that he wanted to have time for himself. However, when Philip arrived at Sandringham, he was horrified to see a busload of cooks, telephonists, and other staff waiting for him. He wanted a simple visit. Regardless, Prince Philip made sure his stay was fun. In the privacy of Sandringham, he enjoyed his freedom. He took up carriage driving. This was a new hobby because he could no longer play polo due to arthritis. Carriage driving became a form of relaxation. He also enjoyed painting watercolors and reading. He preferred history to novels. He also enjoyed discussing things with friends. Philip also enjoyed driving, but in January 2019 he had to stop. He was involved in a car accident. He drove onto a main road near Sandringham. His SUV flipped, but he walked away without serious injury. While he was uninjured, the driver and passenger in the other car were injured. Philip apologized, and 3 weeks later, he voluntarily surrendered his driving license. However, he was still allowed to drive around private estates and was seen behind the wheel at Windsor Castle in April 2019. What was meant to be a short visit to Wood Farm turned into a longer stay. Philip did not return to the palace. He knew he would still try to be involved with royal life despite his retirement. Instead, he embraced the peaceful life at Wood Farm Cottage. This arrangement meant he and the Queen would spend long periods apart. However, they spoke daily on the phone, sharing how their day went. The Queen and other family members also visited Wood Farm to spend time with him. Despite his retreat from public life, he attended important occasions like royal weddings. But as time passed, he began to lose his longtime friends. This was one of the burdens of living a long life. Within a year, Philip lost 3 of his friends. More people he knew passed away, including his valet of 40 years. However, Prince Philip remained remarkably fit and agile for his age, although his short-term memory began to fail him as he approached 100 years old. While everyone was excited about his birthday, Philip was not. He disliked the fuss and attention. Philip also traveled around. He was usually at Windsor during the Easter court and on weekends at Broadlands with Queen Elizabeth. He enjoyed Balmoral less in his later years, cutting his visits short and returning to Wood Farm. The Queen accompanied him to Sandringham, where Prince Charles came over to see them. This was a reversal of roles. However, their visit was usually short, as the Queen had to return to attend to state matters. But then, something unexpected happened. Something that brought Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip to live together again. It was the COVID-19 pandemic. During the COVID-19 pandemic, a lockdown was announced in March 2020. Prince Philip joined Queen Elizabeth at Windsor Castle. They entered what was jokingly called HMS bubble. They stayed in touch with family by video calls. On July 22, Philip made a memorable final public appearance. He stepped into the quadrangle at Windsor Castle to hand over his post as Colonel-in-Chief of the Rifles to the Duchess of Cornwall. This was the last time he appeared before the camera. In January 2021, Philip and Elizabeth were vaccinated against COVID-19 by a household doctor at Windsor Castle. However, in February 2021, he was admitted to the hospital as a precautionary measure after feeling unwell. Though he walked in unaided, the public worried about his well-being. Buckingham Palace confirmed that he was responding to treatment for an infection. He later had a successful heart procedure before being discharged. Upon returning home, the talks on his forthcoming 100th birthday took center stage, but Philip was not looking forward to 100, perhaps because he knew he would not reach it. 3 weeks later, on the morning of April 9, 2021, Prince Philip died at the age of 99. Queen Elizabeth was by his bedside. The palace described his passing as peaceful. The Queen later admitted that he had left a huge void in her life. Prince Philip was buried on April 17, 2021, at St. George's Chapel, Windsor Castle. He was temporarily interred alongside other coffins. His last will was not read. It was to be sealed for at least 90 years to protect the Queen's dignity. There were speculations that it might contain material harmful to the reputation of the royal family. Reflecting on Prince Philip's legacy, Princess Anne described him as her teacher, supporter, and critic. She expressed deep admiration for him. She aspired to emulate his example of a life well lived and service freely given. His ability to treat every person as an individual with their own skills was a defining trait. She also acknowledged the vital role he played in supporting Queen Elizabeth to ascend to the throne at such a young age. His unwavering support helped her rule with confidence. Prince Charles also paid tribute to his father. He said his father had given the last 70 years of remarkable devotion to the Queen, the royal family, the country, and the Commonwealth. He admired his father's dedication and energy in supporting his mother. Prince Andrew, recalling family moments, spoke of Prince Philip as a father who cherished his time with his family. About a year after Prince Philip's death, Queen Elizabeth spoke of her late husband. She said she had spoken before of her deep and abiding affection for this wonderful country and of the many happy memories Prince Philip and she always held. She said it is often said that it is the people that make a place. Her words reflected the deep bond she and Philip had with Scotland and how much she missed him. Although Prince Philip and Queen Elizabeth spent their final years living apart, he lived a remarkable life. His unwavering support for his wife was extraordinary. A year after his passing, on September 8, 2022, Queen Elizabeth II died at the age of 96. She was laid to rest beside her beloved husband at King George VI Memorial Chapel. Even in death, they remained together. What do you think of Prince Philip's decision to live away from Queen Elizabeth in the later years of his life? Do you think he had a hidden motive other than what was revealed? Let us know your thoughts. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more.